we're taught in many ways to go against ourselves, to criticize ourselves, to judge ourselves. And especially when it comes to sexual energy, even within the spiritual space, there's a lot of people who have a subtle or not so subtle rejection of sexuality and sexual energy. But it's all the same energy that animates your life. And it's the same energy that is sexual, becomes creative, becomes meditative. And fundamentally, that's the root where we go against our roots. We try to tame ourselves to be socially conformant. And this is a story that's been going on for hundreds of years. In that, the work is to undo those patterns and to let go of those judgments. As you come into alignment, that energy is allowed to flow, undivided, unscattered. When you experience that non-dividedness within yourself and with others, then there's no question of love or not, because that is itself love, that undivided energy.
The sexual energy that you talked about, and I think I want to go a little bit more into that topic because people tend to confuse sexual energy with sexual intercourse, and I would like to go a little bit more into that topic when you talk about that fire, that sexual fire that has been ignored or repressed and distinguished in that sense. What exactly, can you elaborate on that?
I think my number one suggestion for anybody curious about this is to go onto the Satya Speaks channel and see some of Satya Ji's videos on it. He has certainly explained it better than me. But essentially it's this, that when like you rightly say, when people think about sexuality or sexual energy, it's about the physical intercourse, and there's these feelings of intense desire and lust, and for a lot of people there's also a lot of perversion around it, which is why they kind of see it as a sort of dirty subject, that this is not okay, you know, or it's not good to talk about. But it's ironic because it's actually that attitude of avoidance that has created the perversion in the first place. And these sort of ugly perversions that you see in pornography, for example, where you have a lot of glorification of the ego or harm of the other. There's a lot of violence that's kind of coming through that on. But in essence, before it is rejected, that pure energy, what it feels like, it is essentially your life force. It is who you are. It is your power to stand as an individual, separate from the society. Separate, I don't mean without any interaction. I mean that you don't depend on them to feel that you exist. This is the real independence, that, you know, because that's what most people go into any social interaction, so that they feel that they can exist. But the sexual energy that you feel, when you feel this unblocked within yourself, for example, if you do the shaking and dancing meditation that's on our website, that is a very powerful way to awaken this energy within you. You don't even have to call it sexual energy. It's better you don't call it anything. Just feel it, this current, this vibration that comes alive in your body. This fills you with vitality. Everything becomes bright. You feel so alive and you feel powerful. That power, this is the vitality and the sexual energy that we're talking about. Because that can then become many things. And it's not that it's yours to manipulate. This is the key. People think power, they think control, they think dominance in a particular way. But the only way to really make a friendship with this energy, which is far more powerful than you, it can cook you alive, this energy, this, you know, Kundalini or whatever. It has to be approached with utmost reverence, that this body is not your territory, is not your energy to manipulate in the way that you want. And when I say not yours, I mean not your minds, not your egos. Because when this thing really becomes alive and really starts to move through you, you see that your ego does not have the control that it had anymore. Like, you will respond to a situation not based on what you think you should do, but based on the energy, how it moves you. It starts to just move you. And it's like if you've ever danced spontaneously or done anything like that, you know that kind of feeling where you just follow the movement. But your whole life starts to become like that. So that energy, when you're doing something creative, it pours into that. When you're meditating, it really expands into that. And yes, of course, and human life, if you're having physical intercourse, it also goes into that direction. And there's nothing wrong with that, you know. But I think we are so obsessed with physical intercourse as a society because in the past it was so heavily repressed. And I think why it was heavily repressed, I think, you know, there's different reasons floating around on the sort of more, let's say, I think one reason is that people started to like separate out societies and they didn't want this rampant intermixing between social groups or various things. I think that's a kind of surface level lie reason. I think a deeper reason, which is what Satya Ji says in many of our videos, is that when you cut this off, this power from your base, from you're lost. Like you don't know what's going on anymore because a human being is designed to have this energy flowing through them. It's like imagine a laptop that doesn't have any electricity in it. It's just like a block, you know. And this is our electricity. So they cut it off. Societies, large group civilizations, they realized if people have this real big sense of vitality in them, they're not going to obey like these bullshit rules of like, you know, to keep down the peasants or whatever it is, or they're not going to like submit to our control. They're going to, because they feel this power within themselves to do things. And essentially all you have is energy. If you have so much energy to do things, even if something is very scary or there's a threat of danger or death, you have confidence to face that because you have that energy and you see its wisdom, how it flows through you. It's even beyond you. You know you're channeling something. So that sort of confidence that comes with that, and that, like I said, it is your ability to establish yourself as an individual, that you don't depend on anybody else to feel that sense that you exist. Even if you don't, it's not even a confrontational thing. It's just, I'm not doing this anymore. One other thing I really love about Satya Ji's approach is when he talks about love, you know, you hear a lot about like, oh, you should be loving and kind and forgiving. And that's great. Sounds great. But like, how do I do that? Because I'm bitter and I'm upset. Like, you know, so what he says is that love is, it's a natural consequence of a unified energy that doesn't have contradiction. So what I mean by that is we're split inside always. We are, as personalities, we're taught in many ways to go against ourselves, to criticize ourselves, to judge ourselves. And especially when it comes to sexual energy, this is something also that he's very passionate about, which is, you know, even within the spiritual space, there's a lot of people who have a subtle or not so subtle rejection of sexuality and sexual energy, but it's all the same energy that animates your life, and is the same energy that is sexual, becomes creative, becomes meditative. And fundamentally, that's the root where we go against our roots. We try to tame ourselves to be socially conformant. And this is a story that's been going on for hundreds of years. But in that, the work is to undo those patterns and to let go of those judgments. And as that happens, way I picture it at least is you're kind of a crooked sort of form that is, the energy is going against itself and it's short circuiting. And that's where we get all our neurosis and anxieties and depressions and everything. But as you sort of come into alignment, that energy is allowed to flow undivided, unscattered. It's not going against itself. Then you become a whole, or what they say, individual. Individual comes from the roots not divided, right? And so when there's that, when you experience that non-dividedness within yourself and with others, then there's no question of love or not, because that is itself love, that undivided energy. He always uses this analogy, which I think is very beautiful, that, you know, to awaken is in a sense to burn. To be alive is to burn. And we put off our fires because we're taught that fire is dangerous and fire is hot and, you know, it's bad. So we shouldn't. That's our sexuality, vitality, our anger, whatever it is. But if that's not allowed to burn, then there's no warmth and there's no light and heat to share. And contemplating on this analogy where that light and the heat is the wisdom and the love, he says, the fire is like in the belly, the body, the Durga, and then the heat in the heart is the love, the Shakti, and the Lakshmi, sorry, and the light is the illumination, the wisdom, the clarity. But all these things require that fire to burn at the base, where we are so cut off, or we are very judgmental of ourselves, or we're taught that that's not okay, those more wild aspects of us. And I think that's also the seeing myself as a fire has really shifted even my relationships with people and how I look at relationships at all. Because before, when I was, and I still am, I'm not that I'm feel attached to the psychology of things, but I can see when I'm in that psychological space, there's so many it just feels much more like a gripping thing, that relationship, that there's certain obligations I have to fulfill, otherwise the other person will be upset. I have to do this and that. And there's a sort of exchange where it feels like we're kind of taking from each other. And but with this thing of a fire, I've noticed this happening is sometimes even those same people, those same relationships, the level of affection or warmth or kindness that they show to me, on an ego level, it doesn't make sense because maybe I've not been speaking to them for a while, or I've not been indulging their stories. I've not been listening to their issues. I've not been doing the stuff that normally friends should do. But the warmth is there, the fire is there, and it's impersonal. It's just a warmth. A lot of yogis and a lot of people in Indian traditions, it's these processes or kriyas or techniques to move your energies upwards, and there is a sort of desire or an intention to move towards expanding your consciousness. And I think while this is a very necessary movement, because usually people start blocked on those levels and they're only living on the baser levels, it's like, okay, you start to open these up, but why forget about these things? Like, these root parts, the physicality, the sexuality, and all these things, these so-called lower things. Lower in the sense, yes, it's a more low vibration, it's a more kind of gross, dense thing, but doesn't mean that it's less valuable, right? And I think there's been a lot of, the unfortunate thing is that the sort of psychological pattern of rejecting your sexuality or your roots or who you are has leaked into a lot of the spiritualism that has emerged in the past centuries, where it's like, no, that's dirty, that's bad, this whatever, we need to go this way towards God. And what you find in a lot of these people is they do open up these space and do all these things, but sometimes they lack a sort of vitality or energy for life. And this, I cannot say. It's not that I've met every being in the world, so I don't know. But
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Even the separation of spirituality and material world, like that they are not together, that they're not one, but they are separate. And in the spiritual world, people also, there's a lot of people who say that things like earning money is a bad thing, is an evil thing, or they would say that family relationships, they're not important. You should just focus on yourself. So I think I understand what you're saying with cutting off that lower vibrations, lower chakras. There are so many ways that people refer to it, but it's like cutting off your roots. And if a tree can grow to a certain point, but if you cut the roots, it cannot go further, and at some point it will die. So I think that's what comes to my mind.
It's very true. The analogy of a tree, I think, is a really beautiful analogy for human beings. It's so beautiful in so many ways. But yeah, the tallest trees have the deepest roots also, Is that what you said? But yeah, I think the time is coming in the world where I think in many ways the death of people who have certain ideas in the past really opens up space to approach things in a fresh way. And you see this not just in, for example, spirituality, but also in science. There's a very famous quote that, like, science doesn't advance in like through inventions in the laboratory, it advances by like epitaphs and tombstones. Just like when the old scientists who have all the kind of clout and the say of the idea space, when they die, then there's a space opens up that people are willing to listen to something new. And this is a huge emphasis of Satya Ji's teaching, is the new. That wisdom is new. Wisdom is always fresh. People think of wisdom, ancient wisdom, old texts and all this stuff. But the reason they're valuable today is they're addressing the live present cosmos, which is now. And that it's like a portal to the now. But that kind of, I think that kind of creative approach, like to even take, in a sense, that creative license to approach even life or spirituality in your own way, I think there comes a point in some people's journeys, at least, where that becomes something that they want to do. And I think systems and structures and practices and everything are very necessary to like lay the groundwork, to build discipline, to open up awareness so that you can start to even feel what's going on in your system. But after a certain point, when you become more in tune with your system itself has its own unique design that may not look like anything that you or your gurus or other people you respect might say that it should, or how they might look like.